right, it looks like I see that we are live on YouTube and we are streaming. So we will begin. So this is the special Avon Grove Charter School Board meeting on November 11th. Apologize for the delay. We had some other stuff to discuss, which we'll talk about in a second. So to call our meeting to order, we do have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we did have a executive session just prior to this to cover some litigation, possible legal action. So that was why we were running late. So I do apologize to everyone. If the board would recite the mission statement, please, to inspire the passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. And Sarah, if you would do the roll call, please.
Dwayne Degler.
Here.
Eugene Steger.
Not here.
Okay. Stacy Barno.
Here.
Robert Rainier.
Here.
Kristen Smith.
Here.
Michelle McCrae.
Here.
Deji Akintoy.
Here.
Colleen Preston.
Here.
And Brian Ladman.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We're going to move on. Did Brian, any public comment for this evening?
Yes, so a number of comments were submitted related to the agenda item. There were a couple comments just to point out related to the upper school grading policy. This is on our agenda for next Tuesday's board meeting to discuss and to go over. So we are going to hold those non-agenda item comments and they will be read at next Tuesday's meeting prior to that meeting and that discussion. So the first comment comes from Shane Rowland from Coatesville Area School District. Says, good evening. First and foremost, thank you to all the staff members, all the administrators and board members that have come together during these trying times to make all of this happen. I understand that ELC and AGCS will have a rotation of days. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong date. We read that one already. I apologize. So the first one is from Holly Warren from Avon Grove School District. My apologies again. While I wish this pandemic was not happening and certainly wish we are not seeing cases increase, and while I truly understand the hardships that many families are facing now, any steps the board can take to help reduce community transmission rates of this virus, keeping our kids and staff safer, will be key to helping the entire county recover faster. I hope the board lands on the side of clear trends in the data and not on the sides of varied emotions of an electorate's opinion. The next comment is from Christy Inners of Coatesville Area School District. Other districts have discussed moving fully to virtual for the remainder of the year based on the rising numbers and assumption that the holiday season will accelerate community spread. Is it possible that AGS will consider a similar approach to contain risk? Would there be value to teachers and families making a decision now and avoiding a potential yo-yo effect? The next comment is from Janelle Noby of Avon Grove School District. It reads, our family opted for a hybrid learning model. However, with the increase in positive COVID cases in children in schools, we are concerned. Should the school continue to stay open, are parents able to go back to a remote learning model despite the initial statement stating that they cannot change their mind? Thanks. The next comment is from Amy Offert of Coatesville Area School District. My question is regarding the kids' daily schedule. Most parents are not home during the day to make sure the kids are up and available for class. This has become a major issue in my home. Even if I manage to wake my kids by calling a dozen times, they end up falling back to sleep. Not only are my kids failing, but it's causing tension throughout our home. Watching COVID numbers increase seems inevitable that virtual will continue through the remainder of the school year. Is there any way to give kids the ability to complete their schoolwork on their own schedule, like online programs work? We are expecting our children to self-motivate. This is an impossible task with the situation we are in. We need to be flexible to keep our kids to help our kids succeed during this crazy time. The next comment is from Reba Langer of Avon Grove School District. It's multiple parts. Part of it is to agenda items and part of it is to the grading system question. So I will try to dissect this to the agenda items. With Avon Grove School District opening on the 30th, will the buses be changed in your hybrid model to will buses be changed and be shared for State Road, or will we keep separate bus routes? If busing is to be shared, how are you managing contact tracing since exposure could happen on the main bus or the transfer bus? If and when we return to virtual learning, will buildings still be open to get supplies for lab and art classes and turn in those assignments? And if so, can you have a night, a week that you're there later than 4 p.m. for parents that work, or early in the morning for pickup and drop off? Number 3, after the first of the year, will there be an option to sign up for virtual for the rest of the school year? And that removes the concern of trying to get buses back if and when we open fully. And then again, it asked at a future meeting, can we discuss the grading system? And that is on the agenda for next Tuesday. The final comment comes from Carol Ann Hudson, who is a teacher. It says, while I want the school to remain open for as long as possible, it should be done safely and in the best interest of students, their families, and the school's teachers and staff. Admin allowed us to voice our questions and concerns this afternoon. We completed a survey to rank different hybrid and virtual options in order form 1 to 5, or we could pick just one. Upon looking at the site that was used, it states the results are calculated with a point system where the item ranked first will get as many points as the total number of items you have in your questions and descend from there. This is likely to skew results if staff chose one option or two versus putting all 5 in order. Lastly, CHOP's policy lab was referenced, and as things change constantly, the newest information from this afternoon, which was an article released at 4:36 p.m., was to have area schools go virtual within the week. Thank you for keeping everyone's best interest in mind, and we appreciate all that you do. And that concludes the the related agenda item comments. And again, just to reiterate, anything that was submitted about the grading policy will be addressed on Tuesday, as that's a board agenda item already established.
Thank you, Mr. Bruto. Appreciate that. And thank you, everyone who put in comments. We do appreciate you participating. So we're going to move on to head of school to talk about the COVID data and hybrid plans. So Kristen, Ms. Bishop.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. If you are watching, I do want to start by saying thank you to everybody that has made our plan come this far. Obviously, it takes a team, it takes families, it takes staff, it takes students doing the right thing, following the proper protocol, and we've had a lot of success with kids in school. So I do appreciate everybody's hard work as we had transitioned from the beginning of the school year. So I just wanted to really give a good shout out to everybody that's been working really hard to make this work for our kids. So we do understand the news of this week. We do see the cases across the country that are higher than they've ever been. We're seeing daily cases increase in Pennsylvania. They are at the highest they've been since the start of the pandemic. Hospitalization rates are rising. There is communication about low, limited transmission within our school setting that I'm going to talk about. The Chester County guidance did have an update. Also, the CHOP policy lab update. I did read the newest CHOP policy guidance, so I will talk a little bit more about that as we go through the slides. So when we talk about these decisions that we have to make for the kids and the community, I think it's important to highlight things that we've heard so far since the start of school. I also would like to say that any way you feel about the pandemic, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody wants the health and safety of our kids and our teachers and our staff. There is real struggle for multiple people, and there's many viewpoints on what they think the right thing is. So this slide particularly speaks to Avon Grove Charter School and some of the things that we've heard in this community about hybrid learning and where we are. So there is a child study team that meets regularly regarding kids and the struggles that they're having. So there are students that are struggling with online learning and that are requesting to come to school 4 days a week. There is a waiting list for that right now that we can't accommodate. So we can only have the kids that are struggling along with our staff members' kids to accommodate our teachers. So there are kids that are struggling and would love to come 4 days a week. Students and parents are pleading for more time in school. Some students' home life is not equipped for learning. There are some students that are watching their younger siblings because parents have to work. There are some students that are working jobs. So being at school has helped be able to make a connection to the teachers, understand schoolwork, and see where they are academically. So that is helping. Some students are having success online, but also have the choice. So I know there was a comment in the comments of regarding whether parents can go back virtual. Yes, at any time, you can go back virtual at any time during this time, any time during your selection choice. Anybody can go back virtual at any time. The only people that had to wait till January 22nd are the hybrid selection, because we were looking at social distancing and the number of kids we had in the school. So that is an option. And the students that are having success, or the parents that are concerned, they have picked that. We have had some students move to virtual based on these increasing numbers. So that has happened. And then as far as interventions to support virtual learning and student engagement, we are seeing that when students return to school, those interventions and engagement has increased since they've been in school. So that has helped some of our struggling students. And then struggling across subgroups, it's not just special education students. There are a variety of kids across subgroups that are struggling with virtual learning, and the hybrid model has helped a great deal for those kids. So as far as parents, we have the parents that want to stay virtual get that choice. The parents, if we move full virtual, that have voiced concerns, there were 3 main concerns that they have. One being that parents are essential employees and have to go to work and can't work from home. The balance of support from working at home is a struggle. So if they have a kindergartner or first grader, trying to work while supporting their child at home is very difficult. And then again, childcare costs for a similar level of risk activity. So some of these parents, if we go full virtual, are still going to have to find childcare. So if they go to a Y care program or another daycare program, the risk level is the same, if not greater, being that at school we are able to provide a hybrid model and be able to have the PPE equipment and the things that we've already mitigated thus far. So those are some parent concerns. Teacher concerns, obviously safety is always our number one concern, but teachers have varying opinions about their safety and being in school. There's been conversation around essential employees. So we are essential employees. We do have medical professionals and firefighters and police officers that even in the high numbers still have to go to work and provide a service. So balancing when we move full virtual and when we have to be in school for our families and kids is part of the conversation. Educational effectiveness of models. Some staff have said it's easier to manage online learning when you're just focused on online learners. Some staff have said hybrid learning actually works better because we can see the kids and where they're struggling. It's not just blank screens that we're teaching to, and we're able to see both groups, and it's working. So it really depends on the staff and where they are in their skill set too, that makes the difference. But I do know there's varying opinions about sticking to one model versus the two. School of choice, obviously our school districts, we wish that we were getting direct guidance and everybody was using the same model to make this easier for parents and board members and district officials and charter school officials, but we are a school of choice. So as school districts do different things. There are schools that are going 5 days a week, and that's public school districts too, not just private and Catholic schools. There are school districts that are going to let their upper school go virtual, and then their K-6 elementary school stay hybrid. There is some that are going full virtual. So it really depends on the district, and everybody's doing varying things. With that being said, we are a school that's supposed to serve a community and do the service that our kids and our parents need. So if we are not doing that, then they can have the choice to move. They don't go here because they live on a certain street. They come here because they want that choice for their kids. And then depending on others to do the right thing, obviously, all of this health and safety plan depends on people following the health and safety guidelines. If they're traveling, telling us and quarantining. If they are positive, communicating and not sending kids to school. So there are all kinds of things that teachers are concerned about, and that not knowing what the community is really doing outside of school. And then as far as teacher coverage, and this is one of my biggest concerns, we do have to let teachers quarantine when they have symptoms or in contact with a positive person, along with people that are positive that have to quarantine. So if we don't have enough subs to cover the classes, we are in a bind as far as operational to stay open. So that is not just an Avon Grove charter school problem. That is a district-wide and county-wide problem that's happening here. So we are watching and closely monitoring that situation. And then obviously childcare for teachers is also a concern. So right now, currently, these are our COVID statistics. So currently, right now, we've had 2 employees that have been positive confirmed COVID cases. 1 in September and 1 in October, and they were in 2 different buildings, so they were not related. In both of those cases, nobody in the school contracted COVID from those individuals. So the mitigation worked, and those employees quarantined for 14 days and returned back to school. The Chester County Health Department is advised every single time we have any encounter of suspected COVID or COVID in the school. We've had 1 student that had COVID positive, and it was an athletics team, and no other person on the team was positive. So it was contained in that 1 student as well. But we did have 1 student. So mandated 14-day quarantines. This is different than being positive. So this is people that had to quarantine, are negative, but had to quarantine because they were exposed to somebody who's positive. Their husband was positive, their child was positive from college, their whatever it may be. So employees, we've had 7 employees that were negative but exposed to a positive case and had to 14-day quarantine. And then we've had 26 students. Obviously, if students are virtual and have to quarantine, that might not be reported to us because they're already virtual. So we don't have that data. But currently in the hybrid model, there were 26. Symptomatic staff and students required to test. So this is the person that has symptoms on the chart and is awaiting a test. So they're quarantining, awaiting the results of their test, but then find out they have strep throat and not COVID. There are 13 employees that have had to do that since the beginning of school and 13 students. So this is our statistics. And what I'm proud to report is, like we said, the transmission in our school has not happened based on us mitigating and following proper protocols. So I am very proud of our community that way. We've been communicating, the Chester County Health Department has communicated every Friday our numbers. And based on their guidance, they have said 2 consecutive weeks of over 80 would mean that they would advise schools to go back virtual. Obviously, last week, that number of 84.9 per 100,000 was concerning because it was our first week in the red. So upon that red, we also understood that the Chester County Health Department was changing some things in their guidance. One of those things that they were changing was, instead of 2 weeks, they were saying 3 weeks. And that is an official change in the guidance, that there will be 3 weeks versus 2. Also with that, they were saying that that 80 number was done, and this entire chart was done before kids were in school. Now that they have the data of private, Catholic, and public school districts and charter schools going back to school, and some that have gone back since the beginning of school, they're seeing very low transmissions happening in school. So they are advising that you look at your transmission within your school, look at your staffing levels, and your adherence to preventative measures to stay in school. So those 3 consecutive weeks, they also are advising a phased transition, that you start with the older kids and then go to the younger kids. They are also looking at individuals cannot test out of quarantine. So if you travel into one of those states, if you are exposed to somebody that's positive, you can't go get a test. Oh, I'm negative, I got my test results. You still have to quarantine for those 14 days based on symptoms that can come after the incubation period. So the Chester County Health Department is supporting kids staying in school and asking us to look at our own data within our buildings. Another thing to point out is the Pennsylvania Department of Education. They have their own chart. Since the beginning of this, we've used the Chester County because it spoke to our county. However, this speaks to Pennsylvania. So they only had 3 columns, low, moderate, and substantial, and their substantial was over 100, or within that 100 range. So currently right now, you can see Chester County as of Friday looked better than most of our surrounding districts. We were still based on that PDE chart in the moderate range because we had not reached 100. However, Montgomery, Bucks, Lancaster, Berks, Delaware, and Philadelphia were some of them well over 100. Philadelphia specifically 164. And they are in the substantial range. With that being said, there are school districts doing different things all over the county. So you do have Philadelphia that's virtual. However, Berks County, some of those schools are going 5 days a week, not even hybrid, at a 156. In Lancaster, some are hybrid, some are virtual, some are 5 days a week. In Bucks County, I just heard Council Rock is looking to go 5 days a week. So there are multiple districts doing different things, even in the over 100 number. This speaks to our number specifically by school district. So if you look at Avon Grove, that 53.39 spoke to our 84.9 number per 100,000. So if you look at our population of 31,839, that 84.9 was what it was based on that 17. So there were 17 positive people that made that 84.9 number. If you look at Unionville, there's a 93.14. If you look, that's 24 people because it speaks to the 25,000 people that live there. So if you look at the districts that we serve, Avon Grove, Coatesville, Oxford, Kennett, and Octorara. So we just use those school districts. We did the math of 71. So we would be at 71 per 100,000 and not the 84.9. So it's important to know that our surrounding districts and what they are reporting out. So the CHOP Policy Lab, obviously, they were also looking at a lot of what the Chester County Health Department was saying, which is schools have evidence-linked low transmission outbreak, implement selective strategies, keep the younger kids in school because those are the younger kids aren't as high for transmission rate, maybe reverting to middle and high school kids going online, and then really looking at your sports teams, that a lot of the transmissions were happening because of events and sports games, and leagues right now we're looking at using 5% transmission rate to target to cancel games, and wearing masks was mandatory. So that's what that updated guidance said as of early this week. However, this afternoon, they did say that with the high numbers, they were recommending that schools go virtual. Along with that, there's the athletics, and obviously we just spoke to that. People in stands, parking lots before the games, team meals, team parties. So they're really looking at making sure you limit your indoor sports if possible. And if you are going to try to do indoor sports, eliminate the high risk gatherings. So eliminating spectators and so forth. As far as, a recommendation from me specifically, I would say that sports would be second after we would see what we did with academics. But I would recommend that if we look at this school not being safe enough for students to learn, that it's not safe enough for students to have sports. So at this point, we will wait for guidance from the board, but that's my recommendation going forward. So this here, hybrid learning, obviously, this is the chart you've seen since the beginning. What you haven't seen is the end result right now of where our kids are. So there's 31% blue, 30% gold, which means for the hybrid, it's pretty much split between 31 and 30. Red is full kids that are virtual, that have picked virtual, and that's at 31%. That is climbing based on the people that are selecting to go back virtual. And again, that can happen at any point. Parents can choose virtual. The 9% are high-risk students, special education, or staff members' children that are actually here 4 days a week. So that is that selected group. So you can see it's pretty much split in thirds. Obviously, there's a lot of guidance around the holidays. They are really asking you to be careful with what you do during Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday or whatever holiday you celebrate in December. So it's really important to remember that going shopping, online shopping is better. Obviously, it's a lower risk activity. If you're having a Thanksgiving dinner with family and friends, staying within your bubble or your immediate family is recommended. Watching sports or parades from the TV is also recommended. You start to get in that moderate and higher risk, and this is what depends on our schools staying safe. So we are asking our teachers, if they're traveling, to let us know. They will be on a 14-day quarantine, and any student that travels is also recommended to be on a 14-day quarantine to virtual if they are traveling or doing these higher risk activities. Currently, right now, these are the states that are ever changing on the travel restriction list that we are asking for that 14-day quarantine. And that is updated all the time. So you want to check that out if you're planning on traveling for the holidays. And really, we want to make sure that that everybody understands we respect everyone's position on the pandemic. We're not saying anything that you choose for your family or that you think is the right thing for Avon Grove Charter School is the right or wrong thing. I think what's important is that we try not to let our individual needs affect what the school community needs. So obviously teachers are essential. Widespread cases are happening. Pediatric cases are low. Chester and Delaware County are increasing drastically. The surrounding counties have increased counts, especially in Philadelphia. And then the modeling study shows significant increase in cases over the next 4 weeks. So they are saying very clearly that December is not going to look good and that these numbers are not going to go down. In fact, they're going to go up. Families should discuss and revisit holiday plans if they can and try to do what the health department is asking us to do. So these are the options I gave our administration and our teachers today. Option one is we follow what we've put in place, and that if we have the 80 for 3 weeks, that we follow the new guidance from the county and say 3 weeks instead of 2, that we make everybody virtual from November 30th to January 22nd, which is the end of a quarter. The high-risk students would still come from phases 1 through 3, and staff members, students can still remain so that the teachers had childcare and staff would be in the building. So that would be option one. Option two, that they would remain current hybrid models. So what we're doing right now, that nothing would change. We would continue the hybrid model. And then if we had any transmission in our school and the health department would ask us to shut down a building or a grade level, we would follow the Chester County Health Department guidance and staff would be in buildings. So nothing would change. We would continue to do what we're doing now unless there was a transmission in our school. The other part of that could bring us back to virtual would be staff. If we don't have enough substitute teachers because of quarantine, obviously we would have to go back virtual. Option three is that we follow with what some of the school districts are doing and that we keep K-6 students in school and doing the hybrid model. High risk students, obviously special education would stay in their hybrid model, but 7 through 12 would go virtual. Staff would be in the buildings. Option 4, the incident rate over 80 for 3 weeks, all students, including staff, everybody virtual from November 30th to January 22nd, no staff childcare option, everybody's home. And then option 5 is, and this is happening in school districts, because they're having students that have to come to school, that they think 5 days is important, that they still have the mitigation. They would not be able to do the 6 feet, but the mitigation they think is enough, and they would do a 5-day-a-week transition. So that would be option 5, 5 days a week. But again, everybody has the option to still be virtual in any of these options. Catholic private schools, Lancaster and Berks County are doing this 5-day, and Bucks County at this point is investigating 5 days, and then staff would have to be in the building. So these are the options that we've presented to the board. We did survey the staff, and most of the staff, it is a mixed view. Obviously you saw the teacher comment that options would be different. These are all weighted. So whether they put it 2nd place, 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place, they are weighted in a point value. So currently right now, based on that point value, you see that virtual from Thanksgiving to mid-January with our special education students and our staff members' kids continuing hybrid came in first based on the point value. However, option 2, to stay the course and do what we're doing right now, was the most in first place, the most staff, where they fell in that 65. So there was a variety of opinions on what should happen for our community. It really is ultimately up to the board on what they want to do. So the one thing we know we need to decide today is if we're going to follow the Chester County Health Department guidance, and instead of 2 weeks in the red, do the 3 weeks, and continue to do the hybrid model until we find the numbers in the 3-week span. And then obviously, if the board is ready to have a discussion to talk about other options and vote on options, we are open to whatever the board wants to do. So these are the options again, and I'm now looking for the board's opinions, recommendations moving forward.
Thank you, Kristen. So what we'll do is we'll go around, and if you're on the board and you want to turn your camera on, and if you have a question or a comment, let's go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and we can go through orderly like that. Make sure everyone has time to say anything they'd like. Okay, Stacy Barno.
I just want thank you, Kristen, and your team for providing the most current information. I just think it's critical for us to recognize the very high-risk students and the impact that it will have if there would be an election to go completely, totally virtual at a given point. Those high-risk students come from a variety of backgrounds and high-risk needs. And it's significant. They started back before hybrid was actually enacted, so that the team administratively really looked and ranked those students based upon their individual needs. So I would just, ask that everyone consider that as you make a decision. Children need different levels of support. And I think it just echoes the very beginning of our community needs. Some kids, don't have the support, and they really do need to have an option. So I just would ask that everyone consider that.
Thank you, Stacy. Anyone else? Someone else? Kristen, while people are formulating their questions, I just want to go back and say, so the percentage that you were showing of cases is by the county, but what we're showing, and I just want to make sure I understand, internally in the school doesn't even come close to that. We've been doing, for all intents and purposes, an excellent job of keeping people healthy and safe in the school.
Correct.
Okay. Deji?
Christian, just a question. I wonder if you have a sense of the surrounding school districts. I know Glenn just mentioned there that the illness rate in our school district is in our schools is very, very low. What does that number look like in the surrounding school districts?
I mean, it's pretty similar to ours. Obviously, they're larger. Avon Grove actually put something out recently around their numbers. I actually have them available. Let me open it up. So they had 3 employees were positive for COVID and 9 students. So that's their numbers of as far as positive cases, and they're obviously larger than us. As far as the other districts, I don't have that off the top of my head, but I'm assuming that based on our numbers in the counties, that they fall in line somewhere around there.
I have Kennett's if you want Kennett.
What's Kennett's?
Kennett was 1 positive student case in the high school to date, but they have been virtual. So, I mean, it's probably a skewed number. I know Unionville also has a dashboard on their website that I can pull up quickly. If you give me a minute, I can go through them and loop back to the question because I think it's valid.
Okay. Thank you. While Brian's looking that up, someone else want to comments or thoughts? Ooh, feedback. Go ahead, Colleen.
I guess my comment would be just that we have to just make sure that we're balancing. Obviously, we have the survey numbers sort of from the staff and the teachers, and absolutely that information is very important and needs to go into what we're considering, but it's sort of half the story because the school is made up of students and teachers and staff. So we have to, I think, balance sort of that slide from the beginning, talking about what the numbers, what the student, what was it called? I forget, the student child study groups, I think.
Yeah.
Like what those child study groups are showing versus sort of what everybody needs. It's a school. So we're here to educate kids and make sure the kids are getting what they're needing. And as Stacy pointed out, like the needs of students are just so all over the place. And obviously the needs of the staff and teachers are all over the place too. So just the balance here is, I think, what's so important. And we have to just figure out I don't know how we do this based off of anything, but our individual school information, like the rest of the information is just so all over the place that it's hard to balance everything, I think.
I think it's important and kind of along the same line that this is all happening quickly. So we took an opportunity today to talk with the staff, but the parents and students' perspective, I think, is an important portion of it too. But I think we were kind of operating under the time constraints that we have, in that in our hybrid model, students always have the ability to be virtual. So that's always available to them. And our students who are coming hybrid, if offered, then would want to are kind of a signal of that they would want to continue that, because we're not seeing, all of our students electing to go virtual at this point. Just so that it's not with the timing to try to get out a survey to staff and student or to parents and students, the turnaround is very difficult to do.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Colleen. Stacy Barno again.
I guess I have a question regarding, a couple of the options. Talk about virtual from November 30th or January 22nd. At that time, and I just want to make sure that it's confirmed. So the reasoning for that time period is that it's anticipated that based upon families spending time with other people during a holiday season, that's going to be either the highest risk point or the spike point. What would be the considerations? Would we then look at the guidance being offered by the Chester County Health Department to come back out of virtual into hybrid, similar to the decision making that we had to make whether to start hybrid? So can you just confirm that would be a consideration, and just that the reason, since it's looking at the highest risk points of November 30th through January 22nd, just to confirm that, just so it's clear to parents?
Yeah, I think at this point, the Chester County Health Department is taking the position of, instead of looking at the guidance in the chart, but to look at your individual schools. So anytime there's transmission in our schools, we call any kind of anything that happens, we call the Chester County Health Department, and they advise on what has to happen, whether we need to close a class, whether we need to close a hall, a whole school. It would really depend on their guidance. So, they're communicating that we should really start to look at our schools instead of those charts. As far as the dates concerned, I mean, obviously we don't want to, have people quarantine for 14 days, come back, then it's Christmas, then it's going back. So we don't want to yin yang the teachers and the kids into different programs. And so trying to be consistent, that January 22nd day was an end of a marking period that was a clear break, and then a reevaluation would have to happen. With that being said, to do a January 22nd date of coming back, we would have to plan beforehand to do that. So it would feel very quick that parents, again, would have to decide during the winter months whether they wanted their kids in school or not. So those are all the factors when looking at the dates, but we're open to changing those dates if that's something the board wanted to do and made more sense.
Thank you. Kristen Smith. Brian, I'll come to you next.
My unmute button didn't want to stay unmuted. So I, for one, would love for my kids to be able to stay at least in the hybrid model for as long as possible. But my big concern, I think, is the planning. And I think that what I'm concerned about is that, all of a sudden we have 25 teachers that have to be in quarantine because of that close contact. And then we have to make a decision that doesn't leave anybody any kind of time to plan for anything. So I'm kind of looking at the virtual November 30th to January 22nd only for planning decision, because I think for parents' sake, like I said, if we decided on Monday, oh no, we're missing 25 teachers, we're going to have everybody go virtual, at least for 2 weeks. What does that do for the parents as far as trying to figure out childcare for 2 weeks while we have 25 people out quarantining? So I think that I think that we have to look at planning for parents as a big piece of this. And like I said, I want the kids to be in school as much as possible because I think it is in their best interest to be there. But I think that it's unfair to have to yank the kids at the last minute as well. So I know that really contributes nothing, but it's just my feeling.
No, I think it's great. Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the information, Kristen. I kind of echo Kristen's thoughts regarding continuity of business, if you will, and how important it is to make sure that as community spread increases like we're seeing over the last couple of weeks, that we continue to keep our AGCS community safe and be sure that we can deliver some sort of educational experience to the kids. I hear everything that Stacy was saying about the need to support all students and some more than others through live face-to-face instruction. But as the disease continues to spread throughout our communities, it's just a matter of time before it unfortunately reaches our schools. So can you speak to what kind of plan you have to ensure if we remain open and in a hybrid model, and we do reach a point where we are losing teachers left and right to quarantine, that we can continue to teach the students in a virtual fashion?
Well, currently right now, based on the numbers of staff members that have had to quarantine or, just based on being in contact with a COVID positive person or that were positive themselves, they were still able to virtually teach from home. Their symptoms were not significant where they were sick and couldn't teach. So all of those people have virtually taught from their house. Obviously, we need a proctor for the hybrid kids to be able to be in the room while kids came to school. but that has been able to happen. So we're hoping that we can continue to find enough proctors to be able to maintain that kind of practice. We did raise the substitute rate to compare to all of our surrounding districts. So we're hoping that we can maintain our building subs that we have. I really don't know what our threshold will be when we can't maintain it anymore. But we're hoping, because we can let teachers teach from home, that we're able to maintain anybody that needs to quarantine or that is positive for COVID. So with that being said, I would say that we will have a sense if we're using, I might proctor a room, or, the business office might have to proctor a room while teachers are teaching virtually. And if we're at that level where we're pulling every single person possible, we should be able to have enough notice to tell parents this is not working. I would ask the board what would be a reasonable time frame to have another special meeting if that was the case, to say, hey, we parents need at least 2 weeks, and we need to have at least 2 weeks of high rate where we're pooling administrative staff to be proctors of classrooms, to be able to give those parents that time to transition if staff was an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deji, I'm going to have you go ahead, Deji, and then Rob will come to you next.
Christian, maybe a point of clarification, just so I make sure that I'm on the same page as you are. In all of these options, maybe except for the option 4, the high-risk students, which we already identified very early on in the year to return back to school, would still remain in school while others were going virtual. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Deji. Rob?
Sorry, I'm reading. So I hear what everybody's saying, but my main question is consistency and allowing the parents to know what to expect. And we're talking about a lot of different variations. I just want to make sure that at the end of this meeting, we make a decision where parents know what's coming in the next couple of weeks. That's all I ask. And that's what I've been saying all along. I just want the parents to be able to have an option to make the right opinion, right decision for their child. That's all I ask.
That's great, Rob. I think we're all in the same boat. I think we're on how are we going to handle this and get through the next couple of weeks. So thank you. Brian, hang on. I saw Michelle first, and then I'll come back. Go ahead, Michelle.
In regards to parents knowing what to expect, and talking a little bit about Rob was saying, Kristen, when you're talking about the 14-day self-quarantine in regards to travel around the holidays and engaging in the higher risk activities, which is different than quarantine because of COVID symptoms or because of contact tracing. This is families following this to keep our teachers and our community safe. If a student is following that 14 days because they traveled, do they lose their hybrid spot?
No, we would let them, that would be like quarantining because they were positive.
Okay, so they still have the ability to come back to school, and by being safe and staying home, that they're not going to lose their spot?
No.
Thank you.
No students will lose their spot because of quarantining based on following the guidelines. What we don't want to do is discourage anybody from quarantining and doing the right thing to keep our population safe.
Good question, Michelle. Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, thanks. So going back to what Rob was getting at in trying to allow parents to plan, based upon the current trends and what we're hearing from quote unquote experts right now, they fully expect numbers to continue to increase. And so by the end of the following week, we're faced with potentially looking at our 3rd consecutive week, and then following county guidance, we would consider, it's not mandatory, but we would once again consider instructional, the virtual and full virtual instruction. So based upon that, I mean, what would be a game plan moving forward beyond that time as far as getting everybody or the identified parties back to virtual? And then for how long? would we automatically look then to the end of January?
So, I mean, that is a clear break for an end of a quarter. So if you decide to put students back in virtual because of increasing numbers and holiday, obviously, if you do the 3-week guidance, that gets us to Thanksgiving. And then you're headed right into December for the holidays there. So January after the holiday break would be your next break, but January 22nd is the end of a quarter. So that is why we did the January 22nd date. If for whatever reason you wanted to, after the holiday date break, bring kids back or have the potential, it's the planning of who's picking that. And then we've already threw that date out of January 22nd to parents to be able to opt back in to hybrid. And then you're planning that. So that's a lot of planning for administration of after Christmas and the January 22nd, couple weeks, 2 weeks later. So I think that was just a clean break so that parents could make sound decisions and administrative team had time for the amount of people that might choose to go back hybrid in that break that we've communicated since the beginning of picking hybrid. Does that make sense?
It does, but again, assuming we hit that 3-week threshold on the 20th, we have 2 or 3 days of school leading up to Thanksgiving. Those right now you would plan on being in person, or
those kids are that's already scheduled in the calendar as conference days. So those kids were already home on those days. So really it brings us up to what's already planned on the calendar for parents. So it would really about looking at after Thanksgiving, that November 30th date.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Kristen, I have a question. So basically, and I kind of like to break it into chunks. I think the biggest decision that I see is we have to decide, are we following Chester County, or are we going to try and model how other schools are looking at themselves? And actually what the state and Chester County is kind of saying is look at your own individual habitat or your own individual school is doing to make decisions on going virtual, permanent, or staying hybrid. Is that kind of where we're at with this?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I need a decision from the board about changing the 2 weeks that we've been communicating to the 3 weeks. So if you make that decision tonight, that will say then this Friday, if we have over 80 number, that it gives us another week of data and we're able to pick one of these plans that will bring us out of Thanksgiving. So, and you can decide the plan at the board meeting on Tuesday if you need more time. If you as a board have a decision on one of these plans, that's just another communication point. So I think you do have some time if you just want to vote on the 3 weeks tonight so that we can tell parents we're not doing 2 weeks. So this Friday data is just another midpoint. And then we're waiting 1 more week for that 3rd week of data that will bring them to at the very least Thanksgiving. And then at the board meeting Tuesday, even you could make a decision, or you hold another special meeting before Thanksgiving. So, I mean, that's your options right now. Obviously, it's up to you how you want to time frame this.
Okay. I'd like to Rob's and Brian and point, I'd like to give this parents as much notice as possible. So if we could, yeah. So Kristen, you had a question, Kristen Smith, go ahead.
I just want to kind of clarify that I think that there's kind of 2 different things of guidance that we're going off of that we can look at here. Either we're saying the 3 weeks, or we're saying the guidance as far as what's best for our community. And I think that that's where I'm at with making the decision, not necessarily the county's guidance as far as the 3 weeks versus the 2 weeks, but more what's actually going on in our school community. Because I think that that's I think that they're 2 different things when I look at it. I'm not figuring out my decision based on, well, the county's recommending 3 weeks now, so I'm going to jump to 3 weeks, but I'm looking at them saying, okay, you need to do what's best for your school. And I think that that's, for me, an important factor.
That's a good point, Kristen. I also want to point out, I did say when we were talking about options in special education children, obviously option 4, which is everybody virtual, including special education. The other option 2, if there's high transmission and the Chester County Health Department advises the building to close, that would also include special education. Just so you know, I just wanted to clarify that because I just said option 4 is the only one, but option 2 could be affected based on transmission. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Kristen. And Kristen, you said it much better than I did. Thank you so much, Kristen Smith. Any other thoughts or questions as I'm looking around here?
I think
Go ahead,
just
Stacey.
just the converse of what Kristen Smith had just shared. I think I am concerned about just looking. Yes, we can look within our community, but you have to look within the community. People are traveling across every county border. Many people are traveling across state lines to go to work. So it's not insular. Those children go to homes where parents are traveling to states that are not on that listing. So I think you do have to have some lens of what you're seeing in community spread, because every single child, every single teacher, every single staff member goes back to a home that has other factors. So I think it's just the converse to that, and I absolutely hear what you're saying about look within our community, but every single one of those students is attached to a bigger bubble. And I think that's what we're seeing with just the numbers that are being reported back.
Well, I think I just meant like if they decide next week that they're going to say, oh, no, never mind, 4 consecutive weeks.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. I hear what you're
It's
saying.
not like, oh, well, then we're going to do that because that's what they're saying. So I think
Absolutely.
a specific timeline according to Chester County Health Department isn't actually what it is that I'm considering. It's more of the overall picture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hear what you're saying.
Good point, Stacey and Kristen. Deji?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is maybe just speaking from the heart for just a second, I think where I struggle with this decision is exactly what you just brought up there, Stacey. It's like, we know that parents, we know that people are going to work, we know that there is a high level of risk given all of this factors, given all of the many people in the community that are potentially going to come in contact with someone who has COVID or get COVID themselves. And then I balance that versus my early question to Kristen to say, when you look at the surrounding schools and you look at even our school, the illness rate has been remarkably low. And we know that there are benefits to having kids in school, to having that level of instruction for them. So I think that for me is where I struggle with the decision that we are all being forced to make here, because we're having to balance the potential for illness and risk versus what's best for the kids at the same time, knowing that there has not been a lot of illness in our schools or in our surrounding communities as well. So that doesn't help in the situation here, but I think it's important to, like, for me just to share, like, that's why I'm struggling with this decision the most, is just balancing those two facts.
Thank you, Deji. I agree with that as a parent of a daughter who goes hybrid. The one thing I find that is a comfort or a cushion for me is if I decide that the school makes a decision A and I look at numbers, or if I feel it's spreading too much, I can then say, nope, I'm keeping her home. I'm making her go virtual. So we've given that out to every parent to make their own second judgment against what we as a board decide, whichever way we go. So I find comfort in that, at least. Is there any other questions or comments? Okay. I guess at this point, does anyone, at this point, Kristen at a minimum is asking about how we should proceed, at least moving forward. So we need some kind of, at least to get through that week leading up through right before Thanksgiving, because they're out that week of Thanksgiving, or they're virtual for that week. So we need at least something for them so they can move ahead and plan. Rob, go ahead.
So at this point, given, this is a lot of information to take in at one night, I say we motion to accept the third week of the, 80% or 80, whatever, 80, whatever. I say we choose that method right now. It gives us a couple more days until we get to our board meeting next week. And then it gives the chance for the kids to be in school for a little longer. And then by then, as a board, we should be ready to make a decision next week. That would be my recommendation and my motion.
Perfect. So Rob has made the motion to accept the 3 weeks until our board meeting, and we can make a final decision on a possible option. Is there any discussion or a second on that?
I second.
Colleen seconds. Okay, so before, just one last call, any questions or discussion? If not, I'm going to, go ahead, Michelle.
I just want to say by making a decision to change from 2 to 3 weeks, we're not changing our mind. Our decision last time was based on the fact that we were following the Chester County guidance. The guidance has evolved. That's because things have changed in our community and the rate has gone up a lot. So I don't see this as changing directions, changing our minds. I say that it's still, we're following what they put out, which is now 3 weeks.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, anyone else? Rob?
So I totally agree with you, and we're just trying to be consistent. That's the only thing this school has tried to be, is consistent and awareness for the parents so they can plan accordingly, and I totally agree with you.
And I thank you too for that, because it keeps us successful as a school. So thank you very much, Rob and Michelle. All right, if there's no more questions or comments, Sarah, I'm going to have you do a roll call vote.
Sure. Dwayne Degler.
I agree, I approve, yes.
Eugene Stegger's absent, so is Stacy Barno.
Approve.
Robert Renier.
I agree.
Kristen Smith.
Approve.
Michelle McCray.
Approve.
Deji Akintoy.
Approve.
Colleen Preston.
I agree.
Brian Ladman.
I approve.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Before, I want to make sure, Kristen or Brian, do you have anything further before we basically
Brian,
move on?
Brian did text me. He lost his
I think I'm good.
There
Okay,
it is.
good. No, so what I'm hearing, we have the approval to move forward for 3 weeks. So if parents are tuning in or listen to this later, they know for sure that we will continue the hybrid model up to that Thanksgiving week, which is, or after Thanksgiving, because of that week being virtual, and then conferences. So that would mean that everybody will be hybrid up until, at the very least, November 30th. And then on Tuesday, what I'm hearing the board say is that you will make a motion and vote for which plan you want to do after November 30th.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. So I'll just finish in saying that this is not an easy decision. I saw the faces on the board members. We have everyone's interest, whether it's teachers, faculty, staff, parents. We have all your interests in heart. So bear with us as we go through this. We're learning as we go. This is all new. So if there's nothing else, we can adjourn. Does anyone have anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn. This is Robert Renier.
Second.
Wayne, I'll second. Stacy Barno.
Thank you. All in favor, just nod. Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for everyone that was on YouTube and listening, and we'll see you on Tuesday next week.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dwayne, for getting all this together.
No worries.